The rain hit Manhattan like a fist, pounding the pavement in sheets so thick I could barely see the neon glow of Sterling National Bank's sign through the deluge. My boots slapped against the wet sidewalk, each step a defiance against the storm and the weight of what I was about to do. I didn't need to be here. I could have wired the money, sent a check, or hell, paid cash from the roll in my pocket. But Mrs. Delaney, the old widow in 3B, had looked at me with those tired eyes last night, her hands shaking as she tried to hide an empty fridge. "Just until my pension clears," she'd whispered, and I'd nodded, knowing $100, 0 cents, would keep her from going hungry. That was reason enough to walk into this glass and marble fortress, even if it meant facing her. I pushed through the revolving doors, the cold air inside hitting me like a slap. The lobby was a cathedral of wealth, polished black marble floors, crystal chandeliers casting sharp light, and the faint scent of leather and cologne. Men in tailored suits tapped at their phones, women in pencil skirts moved with the precision of chess pieces. I stood out like a smudge on a mirror, faded leather jacket, jeans worn thin at the knees, hair plastered to my face from the rain. I didn't care. I'd stopped caring about their stares a long time ago. The line to the tellers snaked slowly, and I kept my eyes forward, ignoring the whispers that trailed me like smoke. I could feel them sizing me up, deciding I didn't belong, poor, lost, maybe both. My hand tightened around the damp strap of my bag, the weight of my laptop inside grounding me. They didn't know who I was, not yet. "Well, look who's here." The voice cut through the hum of the lobby, sharp and sweet like poisoned honey. I didn't need to turn to know it was Victoria, my sister, the CEO of Sterling National Bank, perched on her throne of glass and power. Her heels clicked across the marble, each step a punctuation mark in her performance. I turned slowly, meeting her gaze. She was immaculate, as always, blonde hair swept into a chignon, winter white suit tailored to every curve, lips painted a perfect red. Her smile was a blade, and she knew how to wield it. "Evelyn," she said, loud enough for the whole lobby to hear, "still slumming it in our little bank? I thought you'd at least try to clean up before showing your face." A man in a navy suit glanced up from his phone. A teller froze mid-count. The air thickened with attention, and Victoria drank it in. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. "You know we've raised our standards. No walk-ins, especially not—" She paused, letting the word hang like a guillotine. "Beggars." The word landed like a slap, echoing off the marble. A woman near the deposit counter gasped softly. Someone coughed. I stood still, my heart steady but my blood hot. Victoria's smile widened, charitable and cruel, as if she'd just done me a favor by putting me in my place. "You understand, don't you, Evie?" she purred, using the nickname she knew I hated. I nodded once, not in agreement, but because I'd learned long ago that silence could be louder than screams. My fingers brushed the zipper of my jacket, grounding me in the familiar. I stepped out of line, my boots silent on the tile, and walked past her without a word. Her laughter followed me, light and victorious, but it didn't touch me, not anymore. Outside, the rain kissed my face, cold and clean, washing away the sting of her words. My reflection lingered in the bank's glass doors for a moment, head high, eyes burning, before I turned and disappeared into the storm. Back in my Brooklyn loft, the rain still drummed against the windows, a restless rhythm that matched the pulse in my veins. The place was small, cluttered with books and cables, the air heavy with the scent of coffee and solder from my latest project. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I peeled off my soaked jacket, hung it by the door, and crossed to the kitchen counter where my laptop waited like a sleeping beast. The machine was custom-built, its matte black shell unmarked, its innards a labyrinth of code and steel. I powered it on, the screen flickering to life with a soft hum. 3 locks stood between me and what I needed. First, a retina scan, the green light sweeping my eye like a blade. Second, a voice print, my words low and deliberate, "Nightshade never falls." Third, a passphrase typed with steady fingers, each keystroke a step closer to the truth. The screen went dark for a heartbeat, then opened to a sleek interface few in the world had ever seen. Obsidian Trust, my creation, my weapon. $4,200,000,000, 0 cents in liquid assets, hidden behind layers of encryption and shell companies, untouchable by anyone but me. And Sterling National Bank. They'd been begging for a piece of it for years, never knowing the fund's architect was the woman they'd just called a beggar. A soft ping broke the silence. One message, encrypted, from Ghost. "They're holding 60% of your liquidity." Clueless as ever, I read it twice, my lips curving into a smile that wasn't kind. Ghost was my partner, a shadow I'd never met but trusted with my life. We'd built Obsidian together, piece by piece, after my family cast me out. They'd laughed when I said I'd make something of myself, called me a dreamer, a failure, a parasite. Victoria was the worst. "Stick to typing, Evie," she'd sneered at a family dinner years ago, her voice dripping with pity. "The world doesn't need another broke coder." I'd left that night, my coat buttoned against the snow, whispering to myself, "One day, they'll see." Tonight, I didn't whisper. I typed a single command. Initiate full withdrawal. $4,200,000,000, 0 cents, Sterling National Bank. Now. The screen pulsed, numbers spinning like a slot machine, and I leaned back, letting the weight of it settle. This wasn't just money. It was leverage. It was silence breaking like glass. It was Victoria's world about to crack. The first sign of trouble came before I'd even closed the laptop. My phone buzzed, a burner I kept for emergencies. Unknown number. I answered, my voice flat. "Who's this?" A man's voice, low and urgent. "You're playing with fire, Raven Cipher. Back off or we'll burn you down." My pulse spiked, but I kept my tone steady. Raven Cipher was my alias, known only to a handful of dark web contacts. Whoever this was, they'd gotten too close. "Wrong number," I said and hung up, my fingers already flying across the keyboard to trace the call. It bounced through a dozen proxies, dead-ending in a server farm in Dubai. A rival bank, maybe? Or worse, someone Victoria had hired. I'd been careful, but not invisible. Obsidian's enemies were legion, and my identity was the key they'd kill to unlock. I powered down the burner, tossed it into a drawer, and grabbed my jacket. I needed air. Needed to think. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, the Brooklyn streets slick and shimmering under streetlights. I kept my hood up, my steps quick, but the feeling of being watched crawled up my spine. Halfway down the block, I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, matching my pace. I turned a corner, ducked into an alley, and pressed myself against the brick wall, my breath shallow. A figure passed the alley's mouth, tall, in a black coat, pausing just long enough to make my blood run cold. They moved on, but the message was clear. I wasn't safe. By morning, the city was buzzing. My withdrawal had hit Sterling National Bank like a missile, freezing their accounts, locking their doors, and triggering a federal audit. I watched it unfold on a news app, sipping coffee in a diner 2 blocks from my loft. The headline screamed, "Sterling National faces collapse after mystery withdrawal." No mention of me, of course. That was the point. I'd built Obsidian to be a ghost, and Raven Cipher was just a whisper. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Marcus, Victoria's husband. "Evie, what's going on? Saw the news. We need to talk." I stared at the words, my jaw tight. Marcus was a hedge fund bro, all charm and no spine, always fishing for scraps of my life to report back to Victoria. He'd been at that dinner years ago, laughing with the rest of them when she called me nothing. Now he was scared, and I could smell it through the screen. I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled up my secure portal, checking the withdrawal's progress. The funds were in escrow, untouchable, but Victoria's team was fighting back. Ghost had flagged an attempt to corrupt Obsidian's transaction logs, a desperate move that could crash the market and pin the blame on me. I typed a quick message. Lock them out. Full encryption. Ghost's reply was instant. Done. They're panicking. Good. Let them panic. I paid for my coffee, left a tip, and stepped back into the city. My next move was already forming, a plan sharper than any blade. Victoria thought she'd humiliated me, thought she could keep me small, but I wasn't the girl she'd mocked anymore. I was Raven's cipher, and I was about to bring her empire down. The bank's lobby felt different when I walked in the next day. Smaller, somehow, despite the same marble and chandeliers. The air was thick with tension, tellers whispering, clients pacing, security guards stationed at every exit. The lockdown was in full effect, and I could feel the weight of it like a storm about to break. I'd swapped my jeans for a tailored black suit, my hair pulled back, a sleek black folio under my arm. I didn't look like a beggar now. I looked like power. The receptionist, a young woman with nervous eyes, glanced up as I approached. "Good morning. Welcome." "I have an appointment," I cut in, my voice low but firm, under Obsidian trust. Her screen blinked red, and her fingers froze on the keyboard. Before she could speak, I heard the familiar click of heels. Victoria storming across the lobby like a hurricane in Chanel. Her face was a mask of fury, but there was something else in her eyes. Fear. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed, stopping just short of me. "I told you yesterday we're not your charity case. Whatever stunt you're pulling, stop it, now." I didn't answer. I handed the folio to the receptionist, who opened it with trembling hands. She scanned a QR code inside, and her screen flashed again. I need to get the manager," she stammered, reaching for the phone. Victoria snatched the folio, her nails clicking against the leather. "Enough! Let's see what my little sister thinks she's playing at." She flipped through the pages, her smirk fading with each one. Her eyes froze, her breath catching. She looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw her falter. The branch manager arrived, a tall man with silver hair and a calm that didn't reach his eyes. He took the folio from Victoria's hands, glanced at the screen, and stopped. "This is a VIP-level authorization," he said, his voice low. "Primary withdrawal request flagged sensitive." "Obsidian Trust," he turned to Victoria, his tone sharper. "You're listed as an employee in a partnered entity. Did you know?" The lobby went silent, the kind of quiet that swallows sound. Victoria backed up, her face pale. That can't be real. It's a fake." "It's real," I said, meeting her eyes. "You've been working for me, Victoria, all these years, while laughing in my face." The manager's assistant whispered something, and he nodded. "Withdrawal authorized. Amount, $4,200,000,000. Entity signature confirmed. Lockdown initiated for audit compliance. Lobby closed." The front doors locked with a thud. A teller dropped her pen. Victoria's mouth opened, but no words came. Then, like something inside her snapped, she stumbled forward and dropped to her knees right there on the marble floor. "Evelyn," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't do this. You'll ruin me. My daughter, my life. Please." I tilted my head, my voice cold as the rain outside. "You ruined yourself, Victoria. All I did was step back and let you fall." Behind her, someone gasped. The manager didn't move. No one did. Victoria shook her head, mascara streaking her cheeks, her perfect mask crumbling. "You're my sister," she choked out. Are you? I said softly. You made it clear I wasn't family a long time ago. I turned to the manager. I'd like to speak to the executive suite, privately. He nodded, already signaling for the elevator. As I walked past Victoria, still on her knees, I didn't look down. The folio stayed under my arm, and the glass doors of the elevator slid shut behind me, sealing her in the wreckage of her own making. That night, back in my loft, the rain had stopped, but the city still hummed with its restless energy. I poured a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light from a single lamp. My phone buzzed. Marcus again. This time a voicemail. I played it, his voice tight with false warmth. Evie, it's me. We need to talk. I saw the news and, well, you're making waves. Let's meet, yeah? No pressure, just family. I deleted it without replying. Family. The word tasted like ash. I opened my laptop, the portal still active, Obsidian's dashboard glowing in the dark. The withdrawal was complete, the funds safe, but the war wasn't over. Victoria's team was still scrambling, and Ghost had flagged another attack, a DDoS assault on Obsidian servers, trying to crash the system and frame me for it. I typed a command to reinforce the firewall, my fingers steady despite the adrenaline. Another buzz, a text, this time from an unknown number. You can't hide forever, Raven. We know who you are. My blood went cold. I traced the message, but it dead-ended in a Russian proxy. Someone was closing in, and I didn't know how much time I had. I stood, crossing to the window, the city sprawling below like a chessboard. Victoria thought she'd won yesterday, thought she could break me with a word, but I wasn't broken. I was built for this, and tomorrow I'd walk back into her world, not as Evelyn Harper, but as Raven Cypher, the shadow she'd never see coming. The city never slept, but tonight it felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to make my next move. I stood on my Brooklyn loft's balcony, the whiskey in my hand untouched, its amber glow catching the flicker of distant neon. The skyline glittered, a jagged constellation of ambition and betrayal, and somewhere in that maze of glass and steel, Victoria was scrambling to save her empire. My phone sat silent on the railing, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way. Not after what I'd done. $4,200,000,000, 0 cents, yanked from Sterling National Bank's veins, a federal audit locking their doors, and Victoria on her knees, mascara streaked, begging like I was the one who'd written her fate. I hadn't. She'd done that herself, years ago, when she decided I was nothing. A sharp buzz broke the quiet. Another text, another unknown number. Raven Cypher, you're not untouchable. Step back or we'll bury you. My pulse quickened, but I didn't flinch. I'd traced the last threat to a dead end in Dubai, but this one felt closer, sharper, like a blade pressed to my throat. I snapped a photo of the message and sent it to Ghost. Trace it. Now. His reply was instant. On it. Watch your back. I slipped the phone into my pocket and scanned the street below. Shadows moved in the alley across from my building, too deliberate to be random. Someone was watching, and they weren't amateurs. I went inside, locked the balcony door and pulled the blinds. My laptop hummed on the counter, Obsidian Trust's dashboard still open, its numbers steady, but the alerts flashing red. Victoria's team had tried to sabotage our transaction logs, a desperate attempt to crash the market and pin the blame on me. Ghost had blocked it. But they weren't done. A new alert popped up. DDoS attack detected. Server load at 87%. Defensive protocols engaged. My fingers flew across the keyboard, reinforcing the firewall, rerouting traffic through decoy servers in Singapore and Reykjavik. The attack was brutal, relentless, like a digital storm trying to tear my world apart. I leaned back, exhaling as the system stabilized. For now. But the real storm was coming. Tomorrow, I'd walk into Sterling National's boardroom, not as Evelyn Harper, the sister they'd mocked, but as Raven Cipher, the shadow who'd built an empire they couldn't touch. I'd face the board, Victoria, and whatever traps she'd set. And I'd face the truth about why she hated me. Not just jealousy, but something deeper. Something that had festered since we were kids. A wound I'd buried but never healed. The memory hit me as I poured another whiskey, the liquid burning my throat this time. I was 9, standing in our father's study, the air thick with cigar smoke and the clink of crystal glasses. Victoria, 16, was his golden girl, already charming his business partners with her perfect smile. I'd built a clunky computer program on his old PC, a budget tracker for his vineyard. I'd stayed up nights coding it, my fingers cramped, my eyes burning, just to hear him say I'd done something right. When I showed him, he barely glanced at the screen. "Cute hobby, Evie," he'd said, ruffling my hair like I was a puppy. Victoria laughed, sharp and bright, and added, "Stick to dolls, kid. Numbers aren't your thing." The room erupted in chuckles, and I'd stood there, cheeks burning, swallowing the lump in my throat. That was the first time I realized I was invisible to them. But it wasn't the worst. A year later, I'd found her, Victoria, in the same study, slipping a page from Dad's will into her bag. I'd been too young to understand, but I remembered her eyes, cold and calculating when she saw me watching. "Mind your own business, Evie," she'd hissed. And I'd run, scared of her in a way I couldn't name. That page, I learned years later, was the amendment that cut me out of the family trust, forged with a notary stamp she'd bribed a clerk to fake. She'd stolen my future before I even knew what it was worth. I set the glass down, my hands steady now. That memory wasn't pain anymore. It was fuel. I opened my laptop again, pulling up the dossier I'd prepared for the board. Pages of contracts, transaction logs, and a single email from Victoria to a shady offshore account authorizing the transfer of our family's vineyard to her shell company. She thought she'd buried it. She thought wrong. The next morning, the city was gray, the air heavy with the threat of more rain. I stepped out of a cab in front of Sterling National's headquarters, a monolith of glass and steel that loomed over Wall Street. My black suit was sharp, my hair pulled back, the folio under my arm a weapon heavier than any gun. A security guard nodded as I approached the private elevator, his eyes flicking to the biometric panel. I pressed my thumb to it and the doors slid open with a soft chime. No music, no mirrors, just brass and silence as it carried me to the 47th floor, where the real power lived. The boardroom was a fortress of dark wood and leather, the air crisp with the scent of coffee and fear. 7 board members sat around an oval table, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. Robert Templeton, the oldest, with gray hair and sharper eyes, watched me like a hawk. The others shifted in their seats, papers rustling, as I set my folio down and stood at the head of the table. "This isn't a courtesy call," I began, my voice low but steady. "This is a legal alignment. As of yesterday, Obsidian Trust, which I control, withdrew $4,200,000,000, 0 cents from Sterling National Bank. Your liquidity is frozen, your accounts are under federal audit, and your CEO, Victoria Sterling, has been working for me, unwittingly, for years." The silence was deafening. Templeton leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "You've been planning this for some time, haven't you, Miss Harper?" 14 months, I said, meeting his gaze. "Long enough to know every move this bank has made. Long enough to own it." A younger board member, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a nervous tic, glanced at her tablet. This can't be legal. We'll fight it." You'll face charges. Fraud, market manipulation. Try me, I said, sliding a USB drive across the table. Every transaction, every contract, every email, including the ones where Victoria diverted a STEM endowment to her personal real estate ventures. The door burst open, and Victoria stormed in, her heels too loud, her face a mask of fury and desperation. She's lying, she snapped, pointing at me. This is a stunt, a pathetic grab for attention. She's always been jealous, always wanted what I have. I didn't flinch. I opened the folio, pulled out a single page, and slid it toward Templeton. This is the forged amendment to my father's will, dated 2 weeks before his stroke. Victoria's signature. A notary stamp she paid for. It cut me out of the family trust, redirected assets to her offshore accounts. Check the metadata. Templeton's eyes narrowed as he scanned the page. Victoria's breath hitched, her hands trembling. That's not real, she stammered. It's real, I said, my voice cutting through hers. And so is the $4,200,000,000 I just pulled. You built your empire on lies, Victoria. Now it's falling. The room froze. Then Templeton spoke, his voice calm but heavy. We've been waiting for someone like you since your grandfather passed, Ms. Harper. He always said you'd surprise us. The words hit harder than I expected, an echo of the man who'd believed in me when no one else did. My grandfather, Henry Harper, had built Sterling National's foundation, a legacy he'd meant for me, not Victoria. He'd seen the spark in me, the quiet girl who coded in his study while others laughed. You'll outshine them all, Avie, he'd said, handing me a savings book with a note tucked inside. For the youngest who has the biggest heart. Before I could respond, the door opened again, slower this time. Marcus, Victoria's husband, stepped in, his investor grin plastered on, but his eyes were nervous. Avie, he said, his voice too warm. We need to talk, family to family. No need for all this. I tilted my head, my smile cold. Family. You mean the people who laughed when I said I'd build something real? The ones who called me a parasite at Christmas dinner? Marcus tugged at his collar, glancing at Victoria, who was pale, her hands gripping the table. Look, we can fix this. A meeting, maybe brunch. No, I said, cutting him off. You don't get to rewrite the story now. You don't get to pretend you cared. The board member with the nervous tic slipped her phone under the table, her fingers moving too fast. I caught it, my instincts screaming. Ghost, I said into my earpiece, low enough that only I could hear. Check her device, now. Ghost's voice crackled back. She's texting a regulator, trying to leak your alias. I'm blocking it. My blood ran cold. If Raven Cypher's identity got out, I'd be a target. Not just for regulators, but for every rival who wanted Obsidian's secrets. I turned to the woman, my voice ice. Put the phone down, or I'll have your entire digital footprint exposed by noon. She froze, the phone clattering to the table. The board stared, the air thick with tension. Templeton cleared his throat. Mrs. Harper, perhaps we should move to the investor lounge, privately. I nodded, gathering my folio. As I passed Victoria, still standing like a statue, I didn't look at her, but I heard her whisper, You'll destroy everything. You already did, I said, and the elevator doors closed behind me. The investor lounge was all glass and leather, a view of Manhattan stretching out like a kingdom I didn't want. I stood alone, the board's murmurs echoing from the next room. My phone buzzed. Marcus again, this time a text. I know about Raven Cypher. Meet me or I go public. My stomach twisted. He'd found something, maybe an old email, a breadcrumb I'd missed. I'd been careful, but not perfect. I typed a quick reply. Try it, you'll regret it. But the threat lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. I opened my laptop, pulling up Obsidian's dashboard. Another DDoS attack hit, this one stronger, the servers screaming under the load. Ghost was fighting it, but the attackers were relentless, and I knew Victoria's fingerprints were on it. She'd hired someone, maybe the same people who'd sent the threats, who'd followed me in the alley. I rerouted the traffic again, my heart pounding, but the system held barely. A soft knock broke my focus. The door opened, and a security guard handed me an envelope, his face unreadable. "Found this at reception, addressed to you." I took it, my fingers brushing the familiar handwriting. Eleanor, my mother. No return address, no explanation, just my name in her sharp, controlled script. I didn't open it. Not yet. When someone's cut you out for years, their words feel like traps, even when they're written in ink. I tucked the envelope into my folio and turned back to the laptop. Ghost's message flashed. Attack stopped. Traced to a shell company linked to Victoria. She's desperate. I exhaled, my mind racing. Desperate people were dangerous, and Victoria had nothing left to lose. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen counter, the envelope unopened, the whiskey bottle half empty. The city hummed outside, sirens and traffic a distant pulse. I finally tore the envelope open, my hand steady but my heart unsteady. Eleanor's words were precise, no softness, no apologies. "Evelyn, I knew what Victoria did. I saw her sabotage your first startup, the one you built at 19. I stayed silent to protect the family name, to keep us from ruin. I was wrong. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I'm asking you to stop. Don't become what hurt you." I read it twice, then set it down, my hands cold. She'd known. All those years, when Victoria deleted my code, bribed my investors to back out, spread rumors that I was unstable, she'd known, and she'd let it happen. The betrayal wasn't new, but it cut deeper now, a blade I hadn't expected. I stood, crossing to a shelf where I kept a small box of childhood relics. Inside, a USB drive, scratched and worn, held my first coding projects. Clunky, ambitious, the dreams of a girl who thought she could change the world. Tucked beside it was a note in my grandfather's handwriting. "Build big, Evie. They'll never see you coming." I smiled, the kind of smile that hurts, and slipped the USB into my laptop. The files loaded, a time capsule of who I'd been. Budget trackers, encryption prototypes, even a silly game I'd made for my grandfather. And there, in a hidden folder, a video. I clicked it, and his face filled the screen. Older, but still sharp, his eyes warm. "Evie," he said, his voice crackling through the speakers. "You're the one they'll never expect. Keep going. Don't let them break you." Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I closed the laptop, the note still in my hand, and made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd face them all. Victoria, Marcus, Eleanor. At a family dinner they thought would save them. They were wrong. The restaurant was a Manhattan staple, all white tablecloths and low lighting, the kind of place where deals were made and secrets buried. I walked in at 6:45 p.m., my navy blouse crisp, my trousers tailored, my hair tied back. I wasn't here to impress. I was here to end it. The hostess led me to a private room, a long table set with a sign, reserved. I sat at the head, alone, my folio beside me, the weight of it like a loaded gun. Victoria arrived first, her heels clacking, her Chanel earrings glinting. "Well, someone's playing the part," she said, her smile tight as she slid into a chair. "What's this about, Evie? Another tantrum?" I didn't answer, just sipped my water, letting the silence stretch. Marcus came next, his grin faltering when he saw my face. "Evie, good to see you," he said, too loud, too brotherly. "It's been too long." Eleanor was last. moving slower than I remembered, her pearl necklace too tight, her eyes avoiding mine. "My girls," she said, her voice trembling with forced warmth. "Look at us." The waitress took drink orders: wine for Victoria, whiskey for Marcus, chamomile tea for Eleanor. I stayed silent, my hands folded, waiting. Victoria broke first, her voice syrupy. "Evie, something's different about you. Calmer, maybe. Yoga? Meditation?" Marcus chuckled, leaning in. "Or smart investments." "I've been meaning to ask about that, actually. Got a project I'd love your input on." I tilted my glass, the candlelight catching the rim. "Did any of you ever wonder what happened to Grandfather's Pennsylvania Trust?" The room went cold, like someone had opened a window to winter. Victoria's smile froze, Marcus blinked. Eleanor's hands tightened around her teacup. "That trust was dissolved years ago," Victoria said, her voice thin. I reached into my folio, pulled out a folder, and set it on the table. Actually, it wasn't. It was buried, but I dug it up. I opened it, revealing the deed stamped active. I rebuilt it, quietly. No one noticed. Eleanor whispered, "You kept it?" I nodded. "And more. The vineyard in Oregon, the STEM endowment, all rerouted to Victoria's shell company. Forged signatures, offshore accounts. I have the receipts." Victoria's lip twitched. "You don't know everything, Evie." "I had permission." "From who?" I said, pulling up a PDF on my phone. "This authorization, signed by Eleanor, dated the day she was in surgery in Zurich. Explain that." Heads turned. Marcus coughed, his grin gone. Eleanor's hands shook, her voice barely audible. I didn't know what I was signing. They said it was for the family." The room cracked open. I plugged a USB into a nearby screen, pulling up transaction logs, emails, timelines. "This isn't drama," I said, my voice steady. "This is truth. Victoria stole from us. From me. From the women that endowment was meant to help." Victoria slammed her glass down. "You always needed to be the victim, didn't you? Digging, always digging, until there's nothing left." "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "I just wanted to be seen. You wanted to erase me." Eleanor stood, her voice breaking. "Enough, both of you. We've lost too much already." I closed the folder, my voice soft. "This house has 2 doors. Today I walk out the one you didn't build." I stood, leaving the folder on the table, and walked out, the silence behind me louder than any scream. Outside, the air was sharp, the city alive with possibility. I was halfway to the corner when Victoria's voice cut through the night. "Evie, wait! You're not selling the trust, are you?" I didn't turn. "You sold me out first," I said, and kept walking. But as I reached the curb, a figure stepped out of the shadows. A young man, maybe a reporter, holding a notebook, no camera. He didn't ask questions, just said, "Someone wanted you to be heard. Thought you should know." I nodded, my mind racing. Who? Ghost? A whistleblower? I didn't know, but it didn't matter. The truth was out, and it was spreading. A week later, I sat on a bench in Central Park, the morning sun spilling through the oaks. The savings book in my lap was faded, its pages brittle, but it held my grandfather's note. "For Evie, who'll outshine them all." The press had exploded, not with gossip, but with truth. A financial justice blog had broken the story, citing a bank insider who'd had enough. Henry Voss, my grandfather's best friend, had given an interview telling the world about the trust he'd built for me, about the girl no one saw coming. Victoria's license was revoked, her resignation forced. Eleanor's calls kept coming, but I let them go to voicemail. I didn't need her words now. I'd found my own. Across the lawn, my nonprofit's new office gleamed, its sign simple but bold. Harper Cybersecurity Foundation. I stood, tucking the savings book into my bag, and started walking. A raven landed nearby, its black eyes meeting mine, unafraid. I smiled, the weight of years lifting. I'd withdrawn everything I needed, not money, but my name, my dignity, my legacy, and as I stepped into my office, the future opened wide, a canvas I'd paint on my own terms.